different states. That's thousands of practitioners. In 2022, Louise received the Centers for Spiritual Living Practitioner Meritorious Award, which is given to a practitioner who has served the organization in outstanding ways. She's also taught, I don't know how many classes for Ahava, and for the larger organization, she's currently writing curriculum as well as teaching. Louise strongly believes in serving her community and has served on the boards of several local nonprofits. And when not working as a practitioner, she is a member of the professional improvisational theater team, which performs regularly in Lexington, Kentucky, and at festivals around the country. And she uses her improv tools with clients to help them unleash their creativity and increase their confidence. What I know about Louise is that she's an amazing speaker. She's been speaking all over for the last couple of years on Zoom and in person. And she is also one of the founding members of Ahava Center for Spiritual Living. It wouldn't be here without her, trust me. Let's give her a beautiful welcome, Dr. Louise Talon, practitioner.
Is that better? Yeah. All right. I don't have a booming voice to begin with. My improv coach is always saying louder. So I'm so happy to be here with you today. I love this community. It's great just to be with you all. And our theme this year for CSL, I love, it's living everyday wonder. And that before I knew that was our theme, that's been my word for this year is wonder. And so I'm delighted. And the theme for the month of August is nature, which to me is also a wonderful theme. And I just want to start by asking you, what do you just stop for a moment and think, when I say the word nature, what comes to mind? Rocks. And for most people, it's a physical place. It's someplace outside, most likely. It might be the woods or fields, mountains, it might be streams, lakes, the ocean. You might see animals, but for most people, when they hear the word nature, they don't think of humans as part of it, unless maybe you see yourself out in nature looking at something. But the thing is, we are part of nature. Even though we tend to think of humans as separate from the natural world, we are animals, and we are a vital part of the natural world. And so the theme for this week is how humans fit into the natural world and our role in caring for it or destroying it. And the original title for this week that CSL had was Earth Force Report for Duty, and that just sounded way too militaristic for me. And I changed it to Earth Guardians, but even to me that doesn't sound right. I'm more like Earth Collaborators, right? We're collaborating with all that is. And so, we are part of this natural world, but the one thing that sets humans apart from other animals is our ability to destroy the natural world, to decimate the harmonious relationships that exist throughout all of life. And Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind, and this thing called You, wrote what I think is a beautiful thing about how humans are part of this natural world. And he said, I am guided by the same intelligence and inspired by the same imagination which scatters the moonbeams across the waves and holds the forces of nature in its grasp. And that awe and wonder is something that all humans share. And there is increasing evidence that other animals feel this too. And we used to think, way back when I first took my first anthropology class, we were taught that what separates humans from other animals is tool making. Well, we know that's not true, right? All kinds of animals make tools and teach other animals how to make tools. And we said, well, nope, it was altruism. Nope. All kinds of animals do things that are altruistic. They care for each other without expectation of return. Well, then it was compassion. Nope, we know that lots of animals have compassion, all the way from ants up to chimpanzees. Then it was jealousy. Nope, we actually know now that other animals feel jealousy. Then problem solving. Nope, we know lots of animals. I've got a border collie. I know that dogs can solve really complex problems, right? Way more complex than I can solve. And so now we know that the only thing that separates humans from every other animal is our ability to destroy other species with impunity and to disrupt the harmony of our planet. No other animal willfully decimates the population of other animals. No other animal willfully decimates its environment. And when we think about it, you all know I'm a scientist. You're going to get some science when you hear me talk. Human beings are just a blip in the history of this planet, just a blip. If you think about it, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. That's pretty old. And you have to go more than 1 billion years beyond that to get to the first microscopic life forms, the individual tiny single-celled organisms that ended up making all of life. And then you have to go all the way to 210 million years ago to get the first mammals, which is what we're descended from, creatures the size of a mouse. And then all the way up to between 13 and 4 million years ago to get the most recent ancestor, common ancestor between chimpanzees and humans. Chimpanzees and bonobos are our closest relation. And then modern Homo sapiens, us humans, modern humans, we call ourselves Homo sapiens sapiens, which means really, really smart Homo, okay? We only appear somewhere between 90 and 120,000 years ago. So in the 4.5 billion year history of the Earth, we're not even a pimple on the rear end of God. And if we talk about humans settling in groups together, right, that's even more recent. Agriculture, depending on who you talk to, is somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 years old, and that's what caused us to settle and begin to domesticate animals, giving rise to the perfect conditions to transmit things like COVID and flu and everything else, because we live in close proximity, right? So we're just a speck in the history of Earth, and yet since humans first began settling in agricultural communities, we have changed and shaped the Earth in ways that have altered its destiny. And this pace has accelerated since the Industrial Revolution and the rise of capitalism in particular. The recent 1,000-year floods in eastern Kentucky, the massive wildfires all across the western United States, across Australia and many other countries, in France and Spain, the record high temperatures across Europe and Asia are evidence of the ways in which humans don't live in harmony with the rest of the world. We've seemingly forgotten that we all belong to each other, and we all, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's words, inter-are. Not just humans, but all of the natural world. We all inter-are. We cannot exist. If you just think of one item of clothing that you're wearing today and begin thinking of all it took to bring that item of clothing to you, if it's made of cotton like this is, from planting the seeds to watering it to growing it to harvesting it to getting it to the place where the thread was spun and the dye was applied and the stuff was put together and had to get transported to the store and put on the shelf, and then you buy it and take it home. That's a lot of people and a lot of natural things that have to occur to make that happen. So we all inter-are. And many years ago, some of you might remember there was a movie called The Butterfly Effect about, some butterfly flapping its wings somewhere in disaster across the world. That phrase, the butterfly effect, popularized the notion that small things that happen in one place can have a large effect somewhere else. And that phrase was really a misunderstanding of the early concept of chaos theory. And that phrase was first proposed by a scientist named Edward Lorenz, and it refers to the idea that it's super difficult to predict what will happen with complex systems like weather and other natural phenomena. And most things in nature are really complex. They're interconnected and interdependent. And so we can't ever adequately try to tease out what happens with anything. And I know this might be a little heady, but think of it this way. Everything we do has consequences, both intended and unintended. We might think we know the consequences of our actions, but we can't ever know all of them. Imagine you're driving along the highway and you're a smoker, and you think it's not going to harm anything if you throw your cigarette butt out the window. It's just one tiny cigarette butt, barely an inch long. It's not going to have a big consequence. But one of the largest wildfires in California history was started by one butt thrown out the window of somebody's car as they drove down the highway. One small action, very large consequences. We are all interrelated. So I want to talk about two different ways to think about this interrelatedness. Several years ago, I gave a talk here at Ahava about the secret life of trees. And I talked about the wood wide web, the network of fungus that allows communication between trees. Well, newer research has shown that this mycelial network is much bigger and more important than we ever realized. And if any of you are Star Trek fans and Star Trek Discovery, they use a mycelial network to get across the universe, right? So they have this idea that that's really the string that holds the universe together. I don't know if that's true, but I like imagining it. But we know that this mycelial network is much bigger and more important than we ever realized. And Toby Kurz, who's an evolutionary biologist who's at the Free University of Amsterdam, has been studying fungal networks all over the world, and she's actually creating an atlas of fungi worldwide. And an article about her work in the New York Times talked about, beneath our feet, fungal networks are an intriguing ally in efforts to tame global warming. The research is focused on the type of fungi that cling to roots and has a symbiotic relationship with plants. This network is like a secret Silk Road, right? A road that travels many different ways because fungi give trees much needed nutrients extracted from the soil. And in exchange, the trees supply carbon they've pulled from the air by photosynthesis. And we know that carbon is a big factor in global warming. Fungi need carbon to grow. And carbon travels one way to the fungi, and then the fungi return nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus to the other way. And this underground entanglement is vital to life above. And fungi are wildly different, right? Right now, all over Kentucky, and I know in my neighborhood, there are just all different types of fungi that are coming up right now, from tiny little things to giant mushrooms. But what you see above ground is just the tiniest portion of what lives underground as part of these networks. And different fungi are as different from each other as other life forms. We look at a mushroom and think, it's just a mushroom, right? This mushroom is the same as the other. But Juliana Furci, the head of the Fungi Foundation, who knew there was such a thing, but there's a Fungi Foundation, right? She says that a morel and a button mushroom are about as closely related as a flea and an elephant. Wow. So there are these vastly different things which have these immense networks underground. And what these scientists are discovering is that these underground networks of fungi are a vital yet poorly understood part of the harmony of nature. And if they're destroyed, it has drastic consequences for life above ground. And we know now that chemical fertilizer diminishes their volume, that herbicides destroy them, and logging destroys them. Because as logging rips up roots, it destroys these networks. What is known is that without them, the ability to store carbon and take it from the atmosphere is depleted. And more carbon in the atmosphere equals warmer temperatures, which equals more storms that are more severe, which also equals more droughts, more temperature swings, more habitat destruction, which then leads to more storms, more droughts, more temperature swings, and more destructive habitat destruction. And the cycle just continues. Is it too late? According to some scientists, it is. I like to think maybe it's not. It's hard to know. What we do know for sure is that this change is happening much faster than scientists have anticipated. Temperature prediction models for Europe predicted the temperatures that occurred in June of 2022 not to happen until 2050. We know that the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica are melting much faster than scientists predicted, even in the worst case scenario. And we know that 1,000-year climate events like the floods in eastern Kentucky are happening yearly. So what can we do? Do we give up and say, too late, why bother? Or do we learn and grow? Remember earlier I talked about the idea that each action we take can have far-reaching consequences? What would happen? What would happen if we all really began acting like we know that we're all interconnected? What would happen then? And an author that I've been reading a lot of lately is Adrienne Marie Brown. She was the author of that beautiful poem, and she has a book called Emergent Strategy, in which she talks about this idea. And she talks about emergence as the way complex systems and patterns arise out of a multiplicity of relatively simple interactions. So again, this idea of complexity coming from simplicity. And she writes that emergence is another way of speaking about the connective tissue of all that exists. The way the Tao, the force, change life, birds flocking, cell splitting, fungi whispering underground. Emergence emphasizes critical connections over critical mass. building authentic relationships, listening with all the senses of the body and mind. With our human gift of reasoning, we have tried to control or overcome the emergent processes that are our own nature, the processes of the planet we live on and the universe we call home. The result is crisis at each scale we are aware of, from our deepest moral sensibilities to the collective scale of climate and planetary health and beyond. To our species in relation to space and time, the crisis is everywhere, massive, and we are small. So what can we do? But the thing is, this idea of emergence notices the way small actions and connections create complex systems. Emergence is our inheritance as part of this universe. It's how we change in ways that grow our capacity to embody the just and liberated world we long for. And Centers for Spiritual Living has a global vision. And the final piece in that global vision is a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. But how do we create that? Who decides what that is? And the truth is, we can't create it using what's come before. We can't create it with old models. We need a new model, a new way of looking at the world that emphasizes our interconnectedness, that focuses on adaptation and collaboration rather than competition and winning and losing. We have so much to learn from the rest of the natural world. And again, Adrienne Marie Brown writes, the adaptation of small collaborative species, roaches and ants and deer and fungi and bacteria and viruses, all are species that work together collaboratively. How do we begin to collaborate? How do we dismantle systems of oppression that situate some humans at the top of a chain of worth and serves to keep some humans downtrodden? How do we step away from an economic system that relies on exploitation and an emphasis on scarcity, which we have in the United States? We have to unlearn much of what we've been taught about getting ahead, about what success means and what is valuable. What is required is a radical restructuring of the way we do life. As humans, we're trained to focus on what's wrong, what's missing, what's off, to tear down others and to live in lack, to think of the world as a place of limited good in which I better get mine before you take it from me, and once I have it, I better do all I can to keep you from getting it back. You know, this is a country where we laugh at hoarders, people who hoard things. We have TV shows where we can laugh at the shame of people who hoard objects, but we reward people who hoard money. We laud people who hoard money far beyond what they could use in 1,000 lifetimes, but laugh at people who hoard objects. What does that say about us as a society? What if instead we created a world in which we looked for what is right? What is working? If we lived as if there were unlimited good and we could all share in it? What if we lived as if each creature on earth, including humans, was precious, and precious for who they are just as they are, without having to change a thing? Think again for a moment of the worldwide fungal web. Fungi don't say to trees, give me all your carbon or else. They don't say, give me carbon or I'm not giving you nitrogen, dude. Look, last week you didn't give me as much carbon as I gave you nitrogen, so this week I'm withholding. Right? Trees likewise don't withhold carbon from fungi. They work together collaboratively for their mutual benefit. Collaboration is the only way we have to survive. It's the way we humans live in harmonious, right relationship with the rest of nature. We need to be more like dandelions and fungi and less like lions and tigers. And again from Adrienne Marie Brown. How do we turn our collective full-bodied intelligence towards collaboration if that is the way we will survive? My favorite forms of life right now are dandelions and mushrooms. The resilience in these structures, which we think of as weeds and fungi, the incomprehensible scale, the clarity of identity excites me. I love to see the way mushrooms can take substances we think of as toxic and process them as food. Or that dandelions spread not only themselves but their community structure, manifesting their essential qualities, which include healing and detoxifying the human body to proliferate and thrive in a new environment. Think about that, how one day there's a yellow flower, and the next day there's this beautiful cloud that just with the wind blows and spreads seeds. The resilience of these life forms is that they evolve while maintaining core practices that ensure their survival. A mushroom is a toxin transformer. A dandelion is a community of healers waiting to spread. What are we as humans? What is our function in the universe? That's the question, isn't it? This month, as we focus on nature, think about that. What is our function as humans? What if we stop thinking of ourselves as the royalty of creation, here to have dominion over, and instead thought of ourselves as the mycelial network of the world, here to nurture, connect, reciprocate, and love? So I offer you these simple practices to reacquaint yourself with the larger natural world. This week, I invite you to hug a tree. No, really, hug a tree. Go out in a park and put your arms around the biggest tree you can find. Feel its bark against your face. Feel the warmth of it. Listen to the sound of the breeze and the leaves above you. Notice the life that exists on that tree. There might be lichen or moss growing on it. There will be ants going up and down. There will be birds' nests and squirrels' nests and all kinds of things that you can't even see happening with that tree. Think of its roots stretching deep into the earth and the fungi attached to those roots. Sit outside. Just sit in the grass and look up at the sky. Notice the clouds, how they move. Notice the play of clouds and sun and shadow. Close your eyes and just feel the warmth of the sun on your face. Pick up a handful of dirt and smell it. When was the last time you smelled dirt? Right? Pick up a handful of dirt in your yard and smell it, and then go into the woods and pick up a handful of dirt and smell it. It will smell different. A handful of dirt in Red River Gorge smells different than a handful of dirt in the Mojave Desert. I know, I've smelled them both. A handful of dirt in Nepal smells different than a handful of dirt in Israel. I know, I've smelled them. And so think about that. You know, the two scientists I talked about earlier who are studying fungi in Chile, they are taking soil samples and smelling them, and they use descriptors like peppery, pondish, and farty to describe the way dirt smells. Another thing you can do is watch a vulture riding a thermal. You know, we tend to think of vultures as these horrible birds, right? First of all, they do a magnificent thing in nature. They help nature reduce, reuse, and recycle. And they're amazing users of air. Watch a vulture riding a thermal. Notice how they collaborate with the air currents to float. It's an amazing thing. And in the end, remember this, without fungi, you wouldn't be here listening to me. None of us, none of what is around us, none of the people you love would exist. Fungi made the world as we know it. As some of the first life forms on the planet, they consume minerals locked in rocks, creating what we now know as soil that we can pick up and smell. Without them, there would be no plants on land, and therefore no animals, no us. So I'll leave you with this. Oak trees don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold tight to each other when the next storm comes. Under the earth, always, they reach for each other. They grow such that their roots are intertwined and create a system of strength that is as resilient on a sunny day as it is in a hurricane. Dandelions don't know whether they are a weed or a brilliance, but each seed can create a field of dandelions. So this week, ask yourself, what are you creating? What world do you want to see? How will you create that world collaboratively and for the good of all? Let's go into prayer. So I just breathe, knowing that it is the one that does the breathing, for it is all there is. That one magnificent, cosmic isness. I can simply know it as that which was, is, and always will be. Knowing that it is everywhere present, from the smallest single-celled thing to the allness of the universe, there is one expressing as the many, that unity in diversity. And in this moment, I know that one gloriously as joy, as freedom, as creativity, as love, as abundance, knowing that whatever is the truth of the one is the truth of me, is the truth of each beloved in this place, is indeed the truth of all creation. And as I know that, I step into this word, I step into this place of knowing that magnificence is the truth of all, that each of us is simply that joy, that freedom, that love, that freedom of a dandelion seed blowing on the wind is the freedom that lives as each of us this day. That the creativity of Earth's palette, from the tiniest seed to the mightiest redwood tree, is simply the creativity of the one in action. That the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze is the sound of God listening. That there is nothing to figure out. There is only surrender into the knowingness that all we have to do to survive is to treat each other as if we were one. To look at each other knowing that it is simply the divine looking back at the divine, that there is nothing outside of us, that what I do to another, I do to myself. That when I commit cruelty to the planet, I commit cruelty to myself. That when I mistreat anyone, I am mistreating all. That we are here to love and to collaborate madly and wildly with each other. That we are here to support each other and the universe. That we are here to create a world that works for everyone and for all of creation. This I claim and know. And so for knowing this, for speaking this word, I simply give heartfelt thanks. And I release it into the law, knowing it is so. And I allow it to be by saying, and so it is.